On August 31st, 2013, PostSecret published an anonymous postcard. Contemporary reports described an aerial map with a red arrow pointing to a location. The wording implied that a body had been left there. In the days that followed, reports said Reddit users identified the location as Chicago's Jackson Park. CNN described users matching the image to a place in the park. CBS reported that PostSecret had asked for help identifying the location, and that Reddit users determined it was Jackson Park. Vice referred to Wooded Island within the park. But the original Reddit discussion is not located in the accessible research record. The reports tell us that a location was identified. They do not preserve the complete comments, maps, timestamps, or reasoning behind that identification. Contemporary reporting also said that Chicago police received information about the postcard and searched Jackson Park. CNN quoted Officer John Mirabelli describing the message as a cryptic report concerning a possible criminal act. He said officers found no evidence of a crime or anything that was unusual. He also said that nothing had surfaced to indicate that a crime had been committed. CBS later quoted police spokesman Mike Sullivan describing the supposed confession as not bona fide. That is where many retellings stop. A card, a map, a location, a search, and no reported evidence of a crime or unusual activity. But an anonymous claim does not become simple just because a search produces a negative result. The search tells us what was reported as found and not found in that search. It does not establish the truth or falsity of the original statement in every possible sense. This is not a story about proving that a murder happened in a Chicago park. It is a story about what an anonymous claim becomes as it moves from a private submission to a public publication, from public interpretation to a location, and from a location to real-world action. It is also a story about where that chain ends. A secret is a private disclosure. By itself, its existence does not establish that what it describes can be independently confirmed. A claim is different. A claim asks to be considered by someone who was not there. Evidence is different again. Evidence is material that allows a claim to be tested against something beyond the statement itself. The Jackson Park postcard moved through these categories as it entered public circulation. It began as an anonymous submission. It became a public claim when PostSecret published it. And it became the subject of an attempted real-world check because the image was reported to contain a location clue that readers could compare with a map. But the postcard did not become evidence simply because it pointed somewhere. The location created an investigative lead. The subsequent search created a reported result. Neither step independently verified the truth of the anonymous statement. Most submissions in the physical PostSecret system were not published online, so the available evidence does not give us a complete record of everything people submitted, or of the truth of each submission. It gives us a curated public archive, and in this case, it gives us a claim that moved beyond publication because readers believed its location could be identified. The question this documentary follows is not whether the sender told the truth. The available record cannot answer that. The question is what happens when an anonymous claim is specific enough to generate a location, a public response, and a search before the underlying event has been independently established. To understand why an anonymous postcard could acquire public weight at all, it helps to understand the system that received it. In November 2004, Frank Warren began PostSecret as a community art project built around self-addressed postcards. Warren has described printing and distributing approximately 3,000 cards at the beginning of the project. Later accounts describe cards being distributed or left in public places around Washington, D.C. The published submission instructions asked contributors to reveal one secret, make it true, and make sure it had never been told to anyone else before. Those were the project's stated rules. They were conditions for submission, not an independent verification process. The physical system was built around anonymity. A contributor could create or adapt a postcard-sized object, write or depict a secret, leave off identifying information, and mail it to Warren's published address. The sources examined for this project do not establish a requirement that the sender provide an identity, an account, or private registration information for the physical route. Warren has described the physical anonymity of the postcards in terms of their limited traceability. A postmark might provide information about where a card entered the postal system, but the available record does not establish a method that would identify every sender. That is a description of the system's anonymity, not a forensic guarantee in every individual case. Selected submissions began appearing online, first through a blog, according to a later profile, and later through the dedicated PostSecret website. By April 2007, a contemporaneous account reported that more than 100,000 cards had been received. The same account described roughly 1,000 arriving each week, with approximately 20 published each Sunday. These are dated reported figures, not a timeless measure of the project. The arithmetic makes the structure visible. What the audience saw each week was not a complete transcript of every submission. It was a small selected portion of a much larger flow. PostSecret was not simply a mailbox. It was a mailbox attached to an editorial process. The public did not receive every submission. It received what was selected for publication. Museum 2.0 reported that Warren looked for cards that felt authentic, powerful, and new. That is an editorial judgment. It may describe how a card feels as a piece of communication. It does not establish that the event described on the card was factually verified. Warren has also said in a CBS profile, "I read every postcard. I keep every secret." That is Warren's statement about his archive practice. A Berkeley profile reported that less than 2% of submissions reached the website. It also described the remaining cards as part of a physical pyramid. The percentage and the archive description should be treated as reported claims from those sources, not as independently audited figures. Other profiles and exhibitions have reported different archive totals at different dates. Approximately 100,000 cards were reported in a 2007 account. Later exhibition-related material reported more than 500,000. An institutional artist profile reported more than 700,000. A 2019 profile reported more than 1 million. These figures are time-dependent and may use different definitions. They should not be merged into one fixed total. None of this by itself is an accusation against the project. Selection is what an editorial system does. but it changes the public meaning of what is seen. The audience was not reading an unfiltered database of anonymous disclosures. It was reading a curated selection made according to Warren's editorial standards. That filter does not prove that PostSecret's material was false. It establishes something more limited. A postcard reaching the public had passed through publication, but the available evidence does not document a universal external verification protocol for every published secret. PostSecret's published instructions asked for a secret that was true and had not been told to anyone else before. The dossier documents that wording as a project rule. It does not establish that the wording remained identical across every stage of the project's history. A rule is not the same thing as a verification mechanism. In the sources examined for this documentary, no universal external process for checking every submitted secret is documented. The physical route did not, according to the available evidence, require a sender to provide an identity or private registration record. The system was designed to permit anonymous participation. Warren has described a submission in which the act of writing changed the writer's relationship to the secret. In his account, putting the words on paper made the writer realize that what had been written was not true or was no longer true. This is Warren's example. It is not an independently measured study of PostSecret submissions, but it illustrates an important distinction. Sincerity, meaning, and factual truth are not identical categories. A person may express something sincerely without that expression, independently proving the event described. And a project may ask contributors to submit what is true without possessing a documented external method for verifying every submission. PostSecret asks for truth. The accessible evidence does not show that publication itself verifies it. Those are two different sentences. The investigation that follows depends on keeping them separate. The documented PostSecret system began with physical objects moving through the postal system. In 2011, the project expanded into a smartphone application. Wired reported an iPhone app priced at $2, with an Android version planned. Contemporaneous sources differ over the precise launch month. Wired described a scheduled September release. CNET reported a September launch. Today described first availability in October. The safest conclusion is that the app entered the 2011 period amid conflicting contemporaneous dates. The reported feature set is clearer. The app allowed anonymous posts, including short text and photographs. Users could browse posts, respond with hearts, leave comments, add location tags, share material through external services, and flag content they considered inappropriate. Wired also reported that an email address was not required. The difference from a mailed postcard was operational. A physical card required an object, a postal route, and time before publication. The app enabled immediate posting and interaction. A location could appear as an app feature, rather than only as a clue readers inferred from an image. That distinction matters because anonymity was no longer operating only through a slow physical submission. It was operating inside a faster, more interactive environment, one where posts could be responded to, shared, tagged, and moderated at scale. The dossier does not establish that the app caused the Jackson Park incident. The point is narrower. The project's operating conditions changed between the physical postcard system and the digital application, By late 2011 and early 2012, Warren was describing an application operating at a scale he said had become difficult to moderate. CNET and Today, reporting statements attributed to Warren, said that the app had reached more than 2 million shared secrets and had been a top-selling application. The dossier classifies the exact count as a claim that was not independently verified. Warren also said that approximately 99% of the material remained in the spirit of PostSecret, while the remaining 1% overwhelmed the volunteer moderators. He said moderators attempted to pre-screen as many as 30,000 secrets a day. He described complaints reaching him, Apple, and the FBI. He also reported threats involving users, moderators, and family members. These are contemporaneous reports of Warren's statements. The individual incidents and figures were not independently audited in the available record. The figures therefore tell us something about Warren's account of the app. Not an independently measured data set. They should not be treated as proof of every number or every reported incident. In January 2012, the app closed. Contemporary reporting attributed the decision to Warren's explanation that absolute anonymity made it difficult to permanently remove malicious users. The dossier treats the closure as verified. The completeness of the causal explanation remains uncertain. The operational tension is clear, even without turning it into a universal rule. Anonymity can protect a contributor from identification. In a digital system, the same design can also make persistent moderation and accountability more difficult. The sources support a changed risk environment and reported moderation pressure. They do not provide an independent audit of every incident or a single complete causal explanation for the shutdown. The question is now ready to return to the physical postcard. What happens when anonymous material contains a location that a public audience believes it can test? The investigation returns to one Sunday, August 31st, 2013. CNN and CBS described the postcard as showing an aerial map with a red arrow and wording that implied the sender had disposed of a body at the marked location. Vice reproduced wording attributed to the card and credited the image to Frank Warren and PostSecret. The original physical postcard was not located in the accessible research record. Neither was an authenticated capture of the exact original PostSecret page on which the card appeared. What survives in the accessible record is contemporaneous reporting about the card and the image as reproduced in that reporting. That does not establish that the original object was destroyed, deleted, or permanently gone. It establishes only that it was not located for this investigation. The same distinction applies to the historical website record. A Wayback capture from August 31st, 2013 preserves a PostSecret page structure and content associated with an earlier Sunday. But the dossier does not treat it as a capture of the Jackson Park page. The archive trace is useful for understanding the historical site. It does not prove that the relevant original page was deleted. The limitation matters. We can describe what several contemporaneous outlets reported the postcard showed. We cannot independently examine the original physical object, confirm its complete original wording character for character, establish its metadata, or determine whether every reproduced version was identical to the original. From this point forward, the chain must be described with that limitation visible. The location identification was reported as happening shortly after publication. CNN described users matching the map to a real place. CBS reported that PostSecret asked for help identifying the location and that Reddit users determined it was Jackson Park. Vice reported that amateur sleuths identified Wooded Island in less than an hour. A secondary PostSecret archive trace gives a more specific estimate of approximately 30 minutes. It also says that moderators limited discussion to avoid wrongly implicating an innocent person. The original Reddit thread, its comments, its timestamps, its maps, its reasoning, and its moderation records were not located in primary form. The difference between these sources matters. Contemporary reporting supports the broad claim that Reddit users identified the location. The secondary archive trace supplies additional timing and moderation detail, but it is not a primary Reddit record. So the defensible conclusion is narrower than the familiar retelling. Reports say that a location was identified quickly by people outside an official investigation. The accessible record does not allow us to reconstruct exactly how the match was made. Whether later summaries preserve every step of the reasoning, or what the original moderators actually did. A location identification is not evidence that a crime occurred. It is a location identification. The next link in the chain came when information about the claim reached police. CBS reported that an anonymous phone call about the posting prompted a response from the Chicago Police Department, with information passed to detectives. The identity of the caller and the call record itself are not available in the dossier. CNN quoted Officer John Mirabelli describing the message as a cryptic report concerning a possible criminal act. The report said officers went to Jackson Park and conducted a search. Mirabelli was quoted as saying that they found no evidence of a crime or anything that was unusual, and that nothing had surfaced to indicate that a crime had been committed. The available record does not establish the exact search perimeter, methodology, duration, personnel, evidence log, or whether every relevant part of the park was searched. In later reporting, CBS quoted police spokesman Mike Sullivan describing the supposed confession as not bona fide. The dossier preserves that exact police-attributed phrase. It does not contain the internal criteria or documentation behind it. Other language entered the public record through journalism. A CBS headline called the postcard a hoax. CNN used more cautious language, saying it appeared to be a hoax. Those journalistic descriptions are not identical to the police-attributed phrase not bona fide. None should be silently converted into a court-established finding. Warren told Vice, "I do not know if that secret is true." Vice also reported that, at the time of that interview, Warren had not contacted police himself. Later reports described police receiving an anonymous call. These are different moments in the chronology. They should not be merged. Here, 4 categories sit beside one another: a reported search result, a police-attributed classification, journalistic framing, and Warren's direct uncertainty. They are not interchangeable. Laid out carefully, the documented chain looks like this: an anonymous submission, reported publication by PostSecret, public interpretation of the image as a possible confession, a reported Reddit location identification, a reported anonymous call to police, a reported search, a published statement that no evidence of a crime or anything unusual was found, and a separate police-attributed phrase, not bona fide. But these links do not all carry the same evidentiary weight. Contemporaneous reporting describes the publication, although the original page capture was not located. Contemporaneous reporting describes the broad Reddit identification, while the original Reddit thread and its reasoning are not located. The 30-minute timing and moderator self-censorship come from a secondary archive trace. The police search is reported by news outlets and supported by quotations. But the police report, search perimeter, method, and evidence records were not located. The identity of the anonymous caller is unknown. The identity of the postcard sender is unknown. The original physical postcard was not located. The underlying body, homicide, or other event described by the postcard is unverified. Deliberate fabrication is also unverified. This is where the evidence chain breaks. Not because the story has been solved, and not because the claim has been proven false. It breaks because the surviving record no longer allows the documentary to independently test the critical underlying proposition. On one side of the boundary are actions reported to have occurred: publication, public interpretation, location identification, a call, a police response, and a search. On the other side is the question those actions were meant to answer. Did the anonymous statement describe something that actually happened? The accessible evidence does not carry us across that boundary. That is not a failure of the investigation. It is the shape of the evidence. Here is what the accessible record supports. Contemporaneous reports say that PostSecret published an anonymous postcard on August 31st, 2013. Those reports describe a map, a red arrow, and wording implying that a body had been left at the marked location. Contemporaneous reporting says that Reddit users identified the location as Jackson Park in Chicago. A secondary archive trace gives an estimate of approximately 30 minutes. Vice described the identification as occurring in less than an hour. The original Reddit discussion is not located. Reports say that an anonymous call brought the matter to Chicago police, that officers searched Jackson Park, and that an officer was quoted as saying they found no evidence of a crime or anything unusual. CBS separately quoted a police spokesman using the phrase "not bona fide." That is the documented spine. The surviving record does not establish whether the sender told the truth, whether a body was ever present, whether a homicide or any other crime occurred, whether the postcard was deliberately fabricated, or whether the sender was ever identified. It also does not establish that the police search was exhaustive. The search perimeter, method, and underlying records were not located. A negative search result can support the statement that no evidence was found in the reported search. It cannot prove in the abstract that the alleged event was impossible, or that every version of the claim was false. The responsible conclusion is therefore limited. The postcard's underlying claim remains unverified. Its public consequences are more documentable than its truth. There is a particular kind of object that can outlast the claim that created it: the response. The reported Reddit identification. The anonymous call described in contemporaneous reporting. The officers who searched Jackson Park after information about the postcard reached police. And the quotations that followed. No evidence. Not bona fide. I do not know. The original event alleged by the postcard remains unverified. The actions that followed are easier to document than the truth they were meant to test. That is the distinction this investigation leaves us with. An anonymous statement is not automatically evidence because it is published. It is not automatically false because it is anonymous. But it can become consequential before anyone has established which of those possibilities is true. In Jackson Park, the public record reaches a boundary. It can show how far the claim traveled. It can show that a location was reported as identified and the police were reported to have searched it. It can show what officers and public figures were later quoted as saying. It cannot show who wrote the postcard. It cannot establish the underlying event. It cannot turn a negative search result into proof that nothing happened, or convert not bona fide and hoax into one universally established category. The unanswered question is therefore not an empty ending. It is the subject itself. When an anonymous claim can move people to action before it can be verified, where does responsibility begin? With the sender, the editor, the audience, the investigators, or the system that carries the claim from one to the next? The evidence does not answer that question for us. It shows us why the question exists.